Sure. Yeah, there's a few different ways that political scientists try to measure and study political polarization. Often they're just talking about kind of the extent of disagreement in a group, whether it's in society or among members of Congress and so forth. Sometimes they're also talking about the extent to which Democrats and Republicans disagree with one another. I would say, are we living in polarized times? I would say our elites are very polarized, as you probably know. If you look at members of Congress, you have extreme conservative Republicans and you have extreme liberal Democrats, very few people in between, a lot of space in between them. You can measure this in a bunch of different ways just by looking at the policy proposals they're putting forward, looking at how they cast their roll call votes and so forth. So among our elite class, there's a lot of polarization, and it seems like that's increasing over time. There's more disagreement between Democrats and Republicans in Congress, for example, than there was in 1970 by a wide margin. It's probably not the most polarized time. We had a civil war a long time ago as well. So we've seen this before, but certainly over the last 50 years, there's been a dramatic increase in elite polarization. At the public level, I think that's not fair to say that we're living in polarized times. If you look at public opinion among the general public, you kind of get a normal distribution of public opinion. On most issues, most people are somewhere in the middle. They're to the right of Chuck Schumer, and they're to the left of Mitch McConnell, and they're unhappy with both political parties. And you can measure this in a number of different ways. You can try to average across lots of different survey questions. You can even just look at more continuous questions. If you just ask people, what would you like the minimum wage to be? The vast majority of people give an answer that's higher than $7.25, which is our current federal status quo, but lower than $15, which is what the most moderate Democrat in Congress will say. You get, most Democrats say $12 and most Republicans say $10. And even if you just look at Democrats in San Francisco, they're not that, they might say $13 or something like that. So among the general public, things are not that polarized. A lot of people don't want to identify with either political party. You get this kind of normal distribution of public opinion, and it seems like it hasn't changed very much. So there's a clear disconnect between the elites and the general public, and that's one of the puzzles that really fascinates me. But I would say in general, no, we don't live in really polarized times, but the elites are really polarized.
That's exciting news for me. I'm delighted to hear it in a sense, because you can very much get the impression on just following YouTube or Twitter or any other venue that everyone is ready to kill everyone over every issue everywhere in the country. And so I'm delighted to have a doctor in the house who can shed light on this. I do know that I have dear ones in the realm of my family who have lost family members and friends because of differences in politics and their inability to talk about it. So I've seen this close to home, and I've seen reports of this. I've seen classmates just basically shutting other classmates off because they don't have the right political views. So there are at least impressionistic stories that I'm hearing increasingly of people who are just weeding each other out by politics. And you see data, perhaps you're more familiar with it than I am, Anthony, where people will rule out dating prospects based more on the political views of somebody than they will on their religion or their race or any other feature. Their politics is a defining characteristic. So I'm delighted to hear what Anthony is saying, and I'm curious how to put that together with what I'm impressionistically seeing.
There's surely some of this. I mean, certainly people disagree a lot on political matters. I don't know how common it is. I think if you live your life online, if you hang out in a city, if you hang out at a university or among journalists and so forth, if you live in DC, you might get this impression that everybody is like that. There's lots of extremists around, but I think for most Americans that's not their experience. I also think there's quite a bit of, if you just look at certain questions like would you marry somebody from the other party, there's a lot of partisan cheerleading in surveys, right? You've just been asking me political questions for 30 minutes, and I suppose I lean a little bit left of center, and I say, yeah, I really don't like Trump, and I really don't like those Republicans, and yes, I would never marry a Republican or want my child to marry a Republican. But when the day comes that your child brings a Republican home, that's like the 25th thing that you care about. You care a lot more about, are they a nice person? Do they have are they dependable? Do they have a good job or not? Are they, you care about a lot of things other than politics. So I think some of this is partisan cheerleading in surveys. There's one survey question people make a lot of hay over is, just how warmly do you feel toward members of the other party? And people do tend to give answers suggesting that they really don't like members of the other party. Although if you ask follow-up questions, it seems like when they give those answers, they're mostly thinking about elites. They're mostly saying, I really don't like Donald Trump or Mitch McConnell or Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. They're not thinking, I really don't like my friend Steve, who happens to be a Republican. So I think, some of the survey evidence is probably misleading, and not to say that this doesn't exist. It does exist. There are people who have really strong political views and fight over it, but I think that's not the norm in America.
And let me just celebrate that. It is, preparing for tonight's event, I looked at Wikipedia, and it concluded on the subject of political polarization with talk of civil war. And that's pretty scary to hear people use language like that. So it is a tonic for me to hear, this may be not much ado about nothing, but don't believe the hype. Maybe this is much overblown. And if that's true, that to me is the headline.
I agree with that. Yeah, there are some academics you will find who warn about the impending civil war because of political polarization. And I think most of those concerns are overblown. They will ask survey questions like, are you willing to take up arms and fight the other party? And if you ask, in a survey, yes, you might get 2 or 3% of people to give a crazy answer like that. How many of those people are answering honestly? How many of those people are even paying attention to the survey? Maybe they're just inattentively giving the crazy answer. There have been some follow-up analyses suggesting that most of this is probably insincere or inattentive responding. So I think some of these concerns are overblown. But I would say, if your goal is to cause a civil war, one of the ways to do it would be to get people concerned that the other side is about to take up arms. So in some ways, I think these academics are doing something fairly irresponsible that's probably overblown.